Hi. The Tar-Aiym Krang by Alan Dean Foster is the book that I have just finished. Here in this beautiful New English Library edition that is in surprisingly good condition when you consider that it has been getting reread by myself, Deb, the omnivorous reader, for several decades. So I first encountered these Alan Dean Foster books, as I said, many years ago when I was a teenager. I have never let them out of my possession. I've had Alan Dean Foster books that come and go, but these three Flinks New English Library editions I have always held on to. The covers, by the way, I am 99% certain are by Tim White. Comment if you know for sure. I am relying on ISFDB for this because New English Library isn't great at crediting cover artists. Look at that spectacular artwork though. You've got a pyramid in the background, which ends up being the Krang. You've got a shuttle coming out of the clouds on the planet where they have gone to discover this device left there by the Tar-Aiym, a vanished race in the universe. Now, I adored these books when I was young, and I was not rereading them for quite a few years now, worried that on an adult reread they weren't going to stand up to the test of time. However, I was reassured by my last read, which was The Eye Inside by Alan Dean Foster. It was so good that I thought, yeah, it's worth risking it. I am 100% reassured that Alan Dean Foster's writing is as good as I remember. On the reread, I was as enchanted as I was those first years when I was reading it, new to science fiction and fascinated by his world building and his characters. There are authors out there who write their whole lives and never produce a book that I find as enchanting as the Tar-Aiym Krang, or characters as engrossing as Philip Flinks, and his pet mini dragon Pip. The internet tells me that this was actually Foster's first published novel, and wow, that is just so impressive. The internet also tells me that it's the second in the series, and it also tells me that it's the first in the series, demonstrating very ably that one should not trust the internet because one of those things is incompatible with the others. So, with the Tar-Aiym Krang, we start off with this spectacular world building effort. You've got the world of Moth, and Foster describes the geological buildup of the planet, and I love geological backgrounds of planets, so that's great for me. He talks about how rapid glaciation and no mountain ranges have ended up with a lake-based ecology, and he talks about all of that stuff, and he talks about the capital city, which is Drella, where Philip Flinks is walking through at the time, and then he talks a little bit about the whole universe. The universe building, which I adore in these books, is the Human-x Commonwealth. So this is a fictional interstellar ethical political entity that Alan Dean Foster created and wrote within a great deal. He has several series in that, both Flinks books and other books. Anyhow, you've got all this happening, but it never feels like an info dump. Many books will info dump to get this much information at you, but Alan Dean Foster doesn't. What he does instead is, again, he will tell you all these bits of information as you're following Flinks as he walks through the different stages of the city. So you've got apparently one whole circular market area of food that you just walk through, and all these scents and edibles come at you. And then you get into the next district, which is the mercantile district, where people buying and selling. And you've got the marketplace, which the more low life and less regulated members of the planet make their living. And Flinks is part of this strata, this marketplace bordering on legal and illegality, very give and take attitude. Now, all these tiny flashes of Flinx and his mini dragon Pip and his city of Drala and the things that he's walking through has got this beautiful tapestry mosaic effect that fascinated me as a kid, still fascinates me today, the way he does it. And you end up knowing so much about Flinx and his world and his city and his universe without ever feeling like you've been preached to, in my opinion. In my opinion, this is one of the better world building efforts of any book that springs to mind. Now, once we've settled down into that, by then we know that Flinx is an orphan. He is 100% an orphan. He was found in the slave cages as a very small boy, about 6 years old, maybe less, by a member of the underworld market marginal citizens called Mother Mastiff, who raised him as her own, but as very independent. And early on, he manifested a telepathic psi ability that has led to the way he makes his living. He's got this little show which he does next to the market stall of Mother Mastiff. He juggles for a bit. He juggles his mini dragon Pip, which is a incredibly venomous flying snake. No one knows how it got to Moth. It belongs on a planet far, far away. And the mini dragon flies in amongst the balls. It sounds like a great show. I'd watch it. Having attracted a bit of a crowd doing that, Flinx will then use his telepathic abilities. He'll ask the crowd to pay him for him to tell them things. And he basically picks it out of their minds. But he does more than that. So the first question is, on this particular occasion of the opening of the book, is where a person standing in the crowd, a merchant, says, "I'll give you all the money in my pockets as long as you tell me how much is there," which he does, and he does it in a funny way. But next comes a more serious question. Someone who is an off-worlder says that they want to locate a person. He describes the person and describes a rolled up piece of parchment that he's carrying in his jacket. And Flinx reaches out with his mind to see if he can locate this person. And when he does, he opens his eyes. The person is actually right at the back of the crowd. And as soon as he finds out he's been identified, he sort of gasps and runs. And the person who's just given Flinx 100 credits to do this runs after him. Having had a good day's work and a good day's pay, Flinx goes off to his favourite bar, Little Sim's, to have a costly off-world beer for himself and a bowl of salted pretzels for his mini dragon, which is omnivorous rather than pure carnivorous, and apparently loves salted pretzels. On the way there, he hears an altercation in a dark alley. Now, any good citizen of Drala knows better than to intervene in things like that down dark alleys, and Flinx knows better, but his mini dragon Pip lifts off his shoulders and flies into that alley, and Flinx, like any good pet owner, pays attention to his pet and follows. In the alley, he finds that the altercation involves the individuals that he'd encountered in the marketplace earlier. The person that he'd identified as being at the back of the crowd with the map in his jacket has been killed by the other two who were chasing him. The altercation ends more poorly for them than for Flinx, because Flinx has got an incredibly venomous flying dragon protecting him. That'll do it. But he takes the map with him when he leaves. And the map ends up being an interstellar map pinpointing a specific planet. Next thing that happens is he goes to this bar where his friend Sim says that he's suggested Flinx as being a bit of a tour guide for the next day for these two tourists. And Flinx, even though he's in the money, says sure, because the two tourists look interesting. One of them is a Thranx, and one of them is a human. An older human and an older Thranx. And this opens the doors up for Alan Dean Foster to tell us more about his Human-x Commonwealth. And that information keeps on being given to you throughout the book in fascinating ways. We learn little bits of history and small stories on how these two very diverse species have formed such a close friendship and such a close federation. And I'm not going to lie, when I first read this book, this particular alien-human commonwealth was almost as intriguing as Flinx and Pip, because throughout science fiction, there is a habit of making aliens that are insectoid in appearance being bad guys. Think Starship Troopers, the Bug Wars. Think that weird short story about the ant, the alien ant-like creature that gets instantly killed because it's an insect. Science fiction writers love making insects the bad guys. Alan Dean Foster made them equal with humans. And I loved that. So the idea between the Human-x Commonwealth is that the humans of the planet Earth and the insectoid Franks who dwell on a planet called Hivehome created a commonwealth. When the two species first met each other, they were instantly fascinated. The humans were fascinated by the Franks, who've got these beautiful coloured carapaces. You can tell their age from the colour. A light aquamarine or azure is younger, a dark blue is older. And they didn't initially understand what the Franks were fascinated by in the humans, but the human fluidity of motion was something that the Franks had always aspired to and were fascinated by in humans. Likewise, mentalities, the sort of characteristics of the human complemented things that the Franks have always admired but suppressed. The Franks, which were a bit, Vulcan-like, very able to calculate, have always suppressed their emotions. They admired the way humans could express their emotions. It was a perfect meeting of two species, and they've created this incredibly strong commonwealth. I love this commonwealth. And Alan Dean Foster writes inside it a lot. Now, if you like your aliens, I think you can't go past the Franks. They are the aliens. They've got everything, including, apparently, a really beautiful pheromonal odor that makes them smell like perfume. Choose your perfume. Alan Dean Foster is smart enough to never be specific. So, we've got these Franks. Mallory is the human, and the Franks is Suzanne Zuzek. And right there, Alan Dean Foster has done another thing that is really quite impressive. Early science fiction and fantasy writers wanted to create these fantastical worlds and societies, and they often did that by making names that are unpronounceable, make no sense, and are completely unmemorable. Exceptions to this are Anne McCaffrey, her dragon riders. As soon as they become imprinted on a dragon, they go from a perfectly ordinary name, let's say Mallory, to Mallory, with an apostrophe, and they lose the vowel, and it all gets weird. And Terry Pratchett mocked that brilliantly in, I think it was the second Rincewind book. Anyhow, I digress a lot. Trezenzes is the name of our primary Franks in this book. And the fact that I can remember and pronounce that name is quite impressive. The fact that I know where it comes from, even more so. So, the individual is true of the family Zoo, of the clan Zen, and of the hive Zex. It's really, really complex, but consistently good Frank society. So Mallory and Suzanne Zuzek are being shown around the city of Drella by Flinks. Flinks has been a bit of a tour guide in the past. He's a bit of a jack of all trades. He'll do whatever needs doing. But these two tourists are unusual. They aren't interested in the usual tourist things. They don't want to buy at the markets. They don't want to take photographs of the noteworthy gates. Eventually, they want to go into the merchant area where Flinks has never legally been before. They want to examine the towers of the merchants, and they have got the ID that gets them in. Flinks is astonished. He's never known anyone who had that sort of ID before. Once they get into the merchant area, they pinpoint in on a specific merchant family tower, Malalika, something like that. And when they go into the tower, they strike a deal with Maxim Malika, who Flinks has encountered. He's performed at some of his parties before, in his telepathic role. So Malika knows that Flinks has got something a little bit unusual about him. Anyhow, so Mallory and Trezenzes had been waiting for contact to bring them the map, and when he hears that, out comes the map that Flinks found in the alley the other night, shock, horror. Isn't it amazing? And they all go off to find this planet where an incredible, legendary instrument of the long-vanished race of the Tar-Aiym is said to be. The Tar-Aiym were apparently a very warlike and conquest-driven race, but nothing's known about them except archaeological findings. No one even knows what their form actually was. But there's been legends of this huge instrument, one of the last to be built in their region of space before they were destroyed. It was either a defensive weapon, an offensive weapon, or a musical instrument. And that is the Krang. It's a fantastic book. It's fun. It's exciting. It's not non-stop action, but there's so much action in it that it feels non-stop. Alan Dean Foster's Human-x Commonwealth is phenomenal and well worth reading in if you've never read before. And I think the Tar-Aiym Krang is a great place to start. It wasn't where I started. The first one I've got was Orphan Star. And after I read this over and over and over and over again, I was lucky enough to find the Tar-Aiym Krang and The End of the Matter, all in these beautiful New England libraries, almost certainly Tim White covers. I have never let them out of my possession, and I'm probably going to reread all three again. Anyway, the only thing I can really criticize about it, that some people may not like, is our merchant Maxim Malika, whatever. His speech patterns are unusual, and he's always inserting these names for things and words that aren't English. Some people really hate that. I never minded it. When I first read it, I found it ignorable. These days, I've got Google. I actually fell down a rabbit hole of Googling some of the words he uses. Some of them seem to be Arabic, some of them seem to be Swahili. He is described racially as potentially either slightly Arabic or slightly African, but he doesn't come from old Earth. He comes from Moth. So, I've raved a fair bit about this book. I could rave for another hour. I enjoyed it thoroughly. Thank you for watching. I'm probably going to go straight on to Orphan Star again. Have a great day. Read good books. And maybe Alan Dean Foster. Bye.